Hi everyone, this is Heather. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I've got a card tutorial for you. I'm going to show you a really fun way to do a masking technique using some liquid mask. I particularly love this technique with digital stamps. If you want to add a background to your stamp and you don't want to have to hand cut out your image, this is a really great way to mask off your digital stamp and still be able to do a background and some stamping or coloring around it. And the digital stamp that I'm using today is this really fun witch digital stamp, and it is from Daisy Church, and I will link to her Etsy shop in the description box down below. I'm going to be using some drawing gum from, I believe it's pronounced Peebo. It might be Peebo. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. You can pick this up at the art supply section of your craft store. I've also found it on Amazon. For my card today, I've got a purple cardstock base, just 8.5 by 11 cut scored folded in half. I also have a teal layering piece that is cut to 5 1/4 by 4. And I have my digital stamp image. It's been printed on 110 pound weight cardstock. I don't have like a super fancy printer. I've just used my HP Photo Envy 6200 and printed this out, like I said, on 110 pound weight. And the printed cardstock that I'm going to be using on the card has been cut down to 5 by 3 3/4. So first I want to show you how to apply this liquid mask. This one is blue, so the tint is really nice because that way you can see where you're applying the tint to and make sure that you kind of don't go over your lines. This particular image has been printed a little bit larger than the one that I'm actually going to use on my card, but I thought it would just be a little bit easier to see. So all you're going to do is use a paintbrush and pick up the liquid and just paint over your digital stamp. I definitely recommend using an old paintbrush or a paintbrush that you're just dedicating to this, because it will get really sticky and gummy and you really won't be able to use it for much of anything else. So I'm just going to go over my whole stamped image, filling everything in. Make sure if you have any sections like here between her arms and her leg that you don't accidentally paint over those. I also find if you have a digital image that's not too terribly detailed, you're gonna have a little bit of an easier time making sure that you can get all those little areas painted in. So now I've gotten a piece that I've worked on earlier just to give it enough time to dry. Once you've got that everything painted in blue, you just want to set it aside for a few minutes to dry. It doesn't take very long to dry. It actually dries pretty quickly. So with my masking liquid on, I want to go ahead and do my background. I'm using some opaque pigment inks from Spectrum Noir. I'm using Pale Fig and Ocean Blue. I've got a cloud stencil and some stencil brushes. The cloud stencil that I have has two different designs of clouds on each end. So all I'm going to do is just kind of switch back and forth between the colors. So I'm going to dedicate each color to a different brush. I'm going to start off with my ink on the stencil. I've also brought over a scratch piece of paper in case I go over, and I'm just going to lightly swirl that ink up onto the cardstock. Just kind of make sure I have like a nice soft blend on my paper. Now I'm going to spin my stencil over to the other side. I'm going to move on to the purple ink with a different brush. I'm going to lay that stencil down and just do the same thing. And I want a little bit of overlap, and I also want a little bit of white showing. And again, just soft swirling motions, pulling that ink up onto the cardstock. And now I've got both those colors going in some nice layers. So all I'm going to do is just work my way down my card, just turning my stencil, doing it in one color, turning it and doing it in the other, and just rotate that down all the way to the bottom of my card. I finished ink blending my clouds and I wanted to add some additional sparkle and shine to the background, so I'm using Frost White all-purpose ink from Sunico. And I've just got a clear block. You could use any non-porous surface. I'm grabbing a paintbrush. I'm just gonna dab some of that on. I'm gonna take my water spritzer and add just a little bit of water to that. Mix that together. This will just help it splatter a little bit easier. So I'm gonna pick some of that up on my paintbrush, and on my scrap piece of paper, I'm just gonna tap that paintbrush and add lots of sparkle to the background. So I hope it shows up on camera, but I've added lots of splatter and sparkle to the background. Now before I move on to my next step, I want to make sure that everything is completely dry. The ink that I blended on and the splatter that I added. So you can either set it aside to air dry. I'm just going to use my heat tool on low and just make sure everything is dry. Now that my background is completely dry, I'm ready to remove my liquid mask. So I'm going to be using an adhesive eraser to do this. You could also use a gum eraser, or they also make little tools that kind of look like a paintbrush, but it's actually like a rubber nib on it. You could also, you know, just try and roll it up with your fingers. But you're just going to rub over that liquid mask and just remove it. You can kind of grab pieces of it and pull it off. Don't be too rough. You don't want to accidentally pull your paper or erase your printed lines. You're just going to go over the entire thing and just remove that mask. You might find that in some of your areas there's still a little bit of blue tint. You can use a stronger eraser. I'm using a Mono Duo eraser from Tombow. And you can just kind of go in on some of those other areas that might still have a little bit of tinting to them. But once you lay down your coloring medium, that is really just going to fade away and you're not going to see it at all. And now I've got this great colorful background, but I've got a nice open image to add some coloring. So I'm going to be using some alcohol-based markers from Stampin' Up. I'm going to start off with light pink Pirouette, and I'm just going to completely color in her skin tone, avoiding her mouth and her eyes. Next, going in with an ivory marker, I'm going to add some shading and shadowing to her skin tone. I'm going to go back in with that pale pink and just blend those two together. For her hat, I'm using light smoky slate gray, and then I'm going to add some shading and shadowing with the dark smoky slate. I'm going to avoid the brim of her hat, and with the dark smoky slate, I'm going to color in her belt, the little collar that she has on, and add some shading to the hat. I'm going to go in and just blend those two together. For the brim of her hat and her stockings, I'm going to be using light and dark Old Olive. So I'm just going to completely color those in with the lighter shade. And with the darker shade, I'm going to go over the bands of her stockings and add just a little bit of shadow around her legs in the brim of her hat. And also give her some pretty green eyes. I'm going to go back in with the lighter shade of green and just blend those two together. I wanted her to have some pretty red hair, so I'm using Calypso Coral. Again, same technique. I'm going to color in all of her hair with the lighter color. Add some shading and shadowing with the darker color. And back to the lighter to blend those two together. I'm also going to take this lighter color and color in her tongue and give her some big cheeks. I'm using light Daffodil Delight for the bristles of her broom and dark soft suede for the handle of the broom. Then I'm going to also just add a few little flecks in with the yellow just to give it a little bit more texture. And to finish off my coloring, I'm using light and dark Purple Posy. And again, just going to color in her entire dress with the light color. I absolutely love this big frilly fluffy skirt that she's got trailing behind her dress. And with the dark purple posy, I'm just gonna go in and again add some shading and some shadowing. And here is my finished coloring, and I'm ready to add a sentiment to the bottom of my panel. So with black Memento ink, I'm just taking a simple Happy Halloween. I'm just gonna stamp that in the lower right-hand corner. I've added some tape runner to the back of my panel. I'm just gonna center that on this dark teal cardstock. I've applied adhesive to that, and I'm gonna center that on my card base. And here is our finished card. I really love this masking technique. I think it gives you an easy way to have a simple one-layer card without having to do any cutting. It also works great for digital stamps where you might not be able to stamp onto masking paper very easily. And it's really simple and easy to use, this masking liquid, and I really like the results. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to check out my channel and subscribe. And I hope you have a really happy Halloween. This is Heather. Bye.